Thames Valley Police, what's your emergency?
I've got 4 masked men outside my house and they've got weapons. They came round earlier and now they're at my property.
This case really affected me and has stuck with me for quite some time. I felt disgust and palpable anger as I read about it because it reminded me of how, very often, the more you help, the more you hurt. I intend to allow the feelings I experienced when researching this case to come through, at least to some degree, in my telling of this incredibly tragic story. I assume that, by the end, you will share in some of those feelings with me. Please feel free to voice your opinion in the comments. Henry Long, Albert Bowers, and Jesse Cole had been friends from early childhood. To be blunt but utterly realistic, they were all extremely dim, with low IQs and documented learning disabilities, with personalities in addition that were simply repellent. Each pulled from the formal education system by their parents when they were far too young, they went on to approach life as most fools do, with a complete lack of self-awareness, governed far more by impulse than by reason, and without any sense of humility. Henry Long, the least dull of the 3 dullards, left school at the age of 12 and chose to devote his life to thievery, just as his father and grandfather had done before him. By the age of 18, he had amassed a record of convictions for assaults and burglaries, had no job, and clung tightly to the belief that he shouldn't have to work for a living. There is a video online of Long being arrested at 15. He swears belligerently at the arresting officers and, puffing out his chest, repeatedly calls himself a, quote, real man, as though trying to convince the gathered crowd, the police officers, and even himself. The very cringy footage shows the actions of a pathetic young man with no sense of himself, driven completely by ego and disillusionment. Equally disturbing was the fact that his own father had recorded the incident on his phone and chosen to post it. Behavior indicative of the chaotic world in which Henry Long was raised. Many of the behaviors of our parents that we may eventually emulate are caught, not taught, but in the Long home, defiance and a lack of respect for authority in all forms seems to have been modeled and encouraged. 17-year-old Albert Bowers, aligned with Henry Long in belief and conduct, had convictions for battery, weapons possession, making racist threats, and SA. Jesse Cole, also 17, had no criminal record but had recently decided to join his friends in their endeavors as self-proclaimed career criminals. I will note here that Long, Bowers, and Cole were raised in what are known as travelers' communities. These are traditionally nomadic or semi-nomadic groups with distinct cultural identities, histories, and social structures. Many of these communities do not place value on formal education after a certain age. Members may be extremely bright, and many are entrepreneurial, gifted individuals. But these 3 brash, entitled child criminals I'm discussing in this video are certainly not of that ilk. Each of them was a blight on their community. Given their cognitive limitations and their vocational intent to live as full-time thieves, the most these infantile criminals could manage was to devise a loosely organized system for theft. They would pool their funds and pay in cash for a cheap, used vehicle, then use it to search for and steal property to sell. Their sole purpose, their collective job, was to get away with stealing. A very simple intention that, by its very definition, required high degrees of recklessness and carelessness to achieve. Luckily for these 3 simpletons, they believed inherently that only they and their intentions mattered, which kept things comfortably uncomplicated for them. They viewed everything and everyone else as mere obstacles, entirely dispensable. Long, Bowers, and Cole had recently been targeting ATVs due to their value. On August 15, 2019, they are joined by their friend Thomas King, a 21-year-old who sometimes accompanies them on their thieving expeditions. Riding around in their gray Seat Toledo sedan, a UK make and model, with Henry Long in the driver's seat, they make their way to a remote property at which they'd scouted a high-priced ATV. As always, they have tools in the vehicle used for breaking into sheds and removing padlocks or chains. They have also covered their license plates with duct tape and disabled the vehicle's rear lights in order to reduce their risk of detection. They pull up to the remote house on Admore Lane at about 4:45 p.m. and locate their target outside of a detached garage. Two of the criminals get out, wearing masks, and approach the ATV. They are quickly forced to flee, however, when confronted by the owner of the house and the ATV, Peter Wallace, who'd been doing some gardening out of their view. Had Mr. Wallace not been outside at this time, his ATV would have been stolen right then and there. Determined to acquire the valuable quad bike, Long, Bowers, and Cole returned later that night, with Thomas King deciding not to accompany them on this occasion. Shortly after 11 p.m., they are back on Mr. Wallace's property to complete their criminal operation. Awoken by the sound of an approaching vehicle and the sight of its headlights flashing through his window, Wallace looks outside and sees three masked men moving about his property. He calls 999 at 11:17 p.m. as he switches on the outside lights in hopes of spooking them, which it does not.
Thames Valley Police, what's your emergency?
I've got four masked men outside my house and they've got weapons. They came round earlier and now they're at my property. They are gone in to break into something. They're trying to get into my garage or something. Oh, and they're stealing my quad bike. I'm going out there now.
No, don't go out there.
I'm going out there now.
No, because if they've got weapons...
Yeah, I don't care. I've got to protect that bike. They're taking the quad bike.
No, your safety is important. Stay in your property.
Please send someone. I'm going.
Someone's on their way. No, don't go out there.
Have you sent someone or not?
Officers are on their way.
Oh, they've already taken it. And now they're pondering what to do. And I'll tell you what, that's not going to turn out well for me. I hope someone's on their way.
We've got several officers en route, okay?
I can't see any of them. And they're all out of the car. Oh, they're dragging it up the road. They've got the bike out and they're dragging the fucker.
By the time the call ends, the ATV is being towed behind the gray sedan by a thick strap with Jesse Cole riding and steering it. Henry Long is driving and Albert Bowers is riding shotgun. Their intention is to cross the busy A4, Bath Road, and retreat to the nearby Four Houses Corner caravan site. However, as they drive along the dark, narrow one-lane road, they screech to a halt forced by a vehicle traveling in the opposite direction. Stopping only about 15 feet from the oncoming car, Long enacts their escape plan. He gives the order for Cole to detach the ATV and get into the car. At this time, the vehicle facing off with them turns on flashing blue lights and an amplified voice instructs them to stay put. Cole quickly detaches the ATV and runs for the rear door of the gray sedan. Before he is able to get in, however, Long makes his move to escape, driving into a ditch on the side of the road. Cole then turns and runs around the other side of the police vehicle. A constable leaps from the passenger side of the police car and runs toward Cole as the gray sedan pulls back onto the road behind them. Inches from being apprehended, Cole leaps through the open passenger side window onto Bowers and Long floors the gas pedal. Their planned theft had been a failure, but perhaps their planned escape would not. Police constables Andrew Harper and Andrew Shaw had finished conducting a surveillance operation in a nearby town about 4 hours earlier. Exhausted, they were heading back to the station in their unmarked BMW, looking forward to finally returning home when the call came over their radio about the theft of an ATV. Being dedicated and exemplary constables, they decided to take the call. Just after 11 p.m., with Constable Shaw driving, they pulled onto Admore Lane, expecting to run into the gray sedan reported to them by dispatch. Soon thereafter, seeing headlights approaching in the distance, Shaw rolled to a stop and the oncoming gray sedan screeched to a halt in front of them seconds later. Shaw flipped on the car's blue flashing lights and Constable Harper yelled for the occupants of the car to stay where they were. An order was then shouted by someone in the gray sedan and a masked man leapt from the ATV being towed behind it, detached the tow strap, and attempted to get into the car. Before he could do so, the driver attempted to make an escape by driving off-road around the unmarked police car. Constable Harper got out and chased the masked man, who had circled their vehicle and was approaching the gray sedan as it was steering back onto the road behind them. The masked man jumped into the car via an open window just before Harper got a hold of him. Constable Shaw had put the police car into reverse when his partner jumped out and had watched this transpire through his rear window. He saw Harper chasing the masked man, he saw the man leap into the gray sedan, and then he saw Harper fall to the ground on the side of the road as the vehicle sped off. Expecting to see his partner either re-emerge from the foliage lining the road or lying on the ground in the event he'd been injured when he fell, Shaw found no trace of Harper. He drove in reverse until he found a spot to turn around, then proceeded on Admore Lane toward the main road as he reported the situation to dispatch. A moment later, he spotted something lying on the dark, ominous road and stopped the car. When he got out to investigate, he found that it was his partner's stab vest. By this time, backup had arrived at the intersection of Admore Lane and Bath Road. Constables in 2 patrol cars spotted the gray sedan approaching and readied themselves for pursuit. When the driver of the car, ignoring police presence, made a hard turn onto Bath Road, one of them took off after it while the other remained in place. "28-year-old Andrew James Harper grew up in the town of Wallingford in Oxfordshire, England. Educated at the Henley College, Andrew was a driven young man of strong character and integrity. At the age of 19, when most of us are partying and attempting to figure ourselves out, Andrew chose to sign on as a volunteer constable for the Thames Valley Police Department. Given his work ethic and genuine desire to protect and serve others, he was hired as a full-time police constable after only about a year of volunteer service. Andrew was extremely well-liked and respected by his peers, and it didn't take long for him to be promoted to the road policing unit, where he joined those who acted as the department's first responders. Andrew's promotion had come just 28 days after the happiest day of his life. Standing at about 6'5" with an athletic frame, he was described as a gentle giant by his friends and co-workers, but he was called a man with a heart of gold by Lizzie Beckett, who'd known him since they were both 16. Childhood sweethearts, Andrew and Lizzie had remained inseparable for 13 years prior to July 18, 2019, when they and their loved ones gathered at Ardington House for their marriage ceremony. It was a beautiful day that heralded the beginning of an exciting future full of promise that they would build and experience together. Andrew's personal life, due to the way he chose to live and the partner he'd found, could not have been better. His honeymoon to the Maldives with his bride was planned for mid-August. The reason one of the patrol cars had remained at the intersection after the gray sedan screeched by them recklessly was because the constables had witnessed something being flung from the speeding vehicle. At first, they believed it to be the carcass of a deer, but as they neared the curb that it had smashed into before coming to rest, they were horrified to realize that it was the body of Constable Andrew Harper. What the officers were now witnessing was the result of what had actually transpired as Constable Shaw watched the convergence of the gray sedan, the masked man, and Andrew Harper behind his unmarked police car. When the masked criminal, Jesse Cole, leapt into the gray sedan and Henry Long sped off, both of Andrew Harper's feet, as disturbingly unimaginable as it may be, happened to have been inside the loop of the tow strap that trailed behind the vehicle like an unseen snare. This was the start of what Shaw had witnessed when seeing Andrew fall. As he searched the dark road for his partner, eerily coming upon his belongings strewn about the road, Andrew was being dragged, utterly helpless, behind the gray sedan for over a mile. As Henry Long reached speeds of up to 60 miles per hour on the winding country road, Andrew's body was swung like a pendulum, striking curbs, trees and bushes, fence posts, and the like, all while grinding against the rough asphalt that tore his uniform from him, leaving ragged clothing and personal items behind like grim breadcrumbs marking the path of his harrowing ordeal. When Andrew was finally flung free from the tow strap and struck the curb, the extent of his injuries was catastrophic. Andrew's body was destroyed, but he somehow still clung to life. His fellow constables began administering life-saving CPR measures and used a defibrillator on him until a paramedic arrived and instructed them to stop. There was simply no way that Andrew would be able to survive the injuries he had sustained, which included severe brain injuries. The paramedic said earnestly that it would be unfair, even cruel, to make any further attempts. Constable Andrew Harper was declared dead at 11:45 p.m. right there on the side of the road. A major task force was immediately assembled by the Thames Valley Police Department to locate Andrew's killers. A police helicopter equipped with thermal imaging technology proved to be most crucial in this effort. The pilot spotted a, quote, hot vehicle and 3 bodies hiding nearby about 4 miles from the scene of the crime. Those 3 individuals were placed under arrest less than an hour later. Henry Long provided a prepared statement in his initial interview, claiming to have been with his aunt and uncle at the traveler's site when the crime had occurred. They'd been watching DVDs, The Goonies and The Fast and the Furious, which to the officers must have landed like a calculated lie laced with fatal irony. He'd gone to bed at around 10:30 p.m. and was later awoken by the arrival of police. Unlike Long, his accomplices, Bowers and Cole, simply stated no comment throughout questioning. The traveler's site was then searched by police. They located the gray sedan with the tow strap still attached to the trunk hinge, as well as the clothing that Cole had been wearing in Shaw and Harper's dashcam footage, which was soon definitively linked to him via DNA testing. Apparently, Long and Bowers had either discarded or handed off their cell phones prior to the search, but Cole's phone was located in one of the caravans at the site. With this storehouse of incriminating data, police were able to obtain the phone numbers of Long and Bowers and track their digital footprints. They then pulled CCTV footage of the 3 criminals working together on the day of the crime, as well as preparing for it in the days prior, which included video of Long practicing evasive maneuvers in the gray sedan. All 3 criminals continued to deny any involvement in the events of the night in question. When formally presented with the evidence, though, they admitted to having been in the vehicle with Long identified as the driver when the theft of the ATV was committed. At this time, they were charged with Andrew Harper's murder. Throughout this entire process, no regret or sense of remorse was shown by Long, Bowers, or Cole. The entire police force shared in the devastation felt by Andrew Harper's family following his shocking and untimely death. The senselessness of it all was just so completely overwhelming. The Thames Valley Police Department joined Andrew's wife and family for a memorial held in his honor. A police whistle blew and a moment of silence was observed for the fallen constable. Departments across the country also attended remotely and did the same. On October 14, 2019, hundreds lined the streets of Oxford for Andrew's funeral procession. Constables carried his coffin, draped in a police flag, into the church where friends and colleagues spoke with pride of Andrew's admirable personality, his achievements, the kind of officer he was, and the bravery he had repeatedly shown in the line of duty. Lizzie then spoke, quote, "I miss you more and more as the days pass into weeks. My love for you will never fade. The sound of your laugh will stay with me. Your beautiful smile and warm embrace will fill my dreams and comfort me as you always have." Unquote. When the service ended, Lizzie hugged the coffin and could not let go. It was heartbreaking for all in attendance. The trial would begin 10 months after Andrew Harper's death. All 3 criminals admitted to having stolen Mr. Wallace's ATV, but denied murder, claiming not to know that Andrew was being dragged behind their vehicle. This was a very difficult proposition for anyone to accept, but in order to get the murder convictions they sought, the prosecution somehow needed to prove that they did in fact know. Lizzie, seeing her husband's killers in person for the first time, was struck by their conduct in the courtroom. Showing no decency, they joked with each other and laughed during the proceedings. Measures had to be taken to protect the jury during trial, as they had received threats from people linked to the criminals. They also received counseling, as had the constables who were with Andrew when he died, before seeing the full extent of Andrew's injuries, which had not been reported to the public. The prosecution described the reckless intent of the criminals during but also prior to the night of Andrew Harper's death, as this had not been the first occasion on which they had intended to escape police capture. They agreed before the court that on these occasions they would attempt to get away as fast as possible. They also accepted that someone could be killed in such situations, but denied ever having thought about it during the commission of any of their past crimes. On August 15, 2019, when they returned to steal the ATV late at night, they were well aware that someone might be on the property, as they'd encountered Mr. Wallace there that afternoon. What the prosecution asked was the plan had Mr. Wallace confronted them again on this occasion. The criminals, with their identities completely disguised, had weapons with them at the time: an axe, a crowbar, and a length of pipe. At the very least, a volatile and dangerous confrontation in which the threat of serious harm to Mr. Wallace was entirely foreseeable. The desperation and determination they had shown in attempting to steal the ATV, and which they would again show only moments later, further supported the prosecution's position. When faced off with the unmarked police vehicle, they were all aware that if they were to escape, reckless and dangerous driving would be required. Andrew Harper had gotten so close to the gray sedan that all of the occupants had certainly seen him. They had to have known at some point after driving away that someone was caught in the loop of the tow strap tied to their vehicle. The marks on the road showed, beyond any doubt, that Henry Long had been attempting to get rid of whatever it was that they were dragging. The prosecution also brought to light that when the gray sedan crossed Bath Road, it slowed almost to a halt when Andrew's body detached from the tow strap. There were streetlights as well as patrol car headlights illuminating the spot at which his body had come to rest against the curb. It is very likely that they saw his body there, discovering what they had been dragging if they hadn't known prior to that moment, which they almost certainly did. Before the trial began, the prosecution had conducted a reconstruction of the events that led to Andrew Harper's death using the same vehicle and tow strap and a police crash test mannequin of the same height and weight, wearing the same uniform and gear. An advanced police driver covered the exact same ground the gray sedan had traveled that night, at the same speed, and found that it was nearly impossible to control the small vehicle with the 200-pound mannequin being dragged behind it. What they also found shocking and disturbing was the sound it made as it scraped against the asphalt and smashed into curbs, trees, bushes, and the like throughout the reconstruction. This, in reality, seems to explain why Long had admitted to blasting the radio during their escape, not as he had indicated to drown out the sound of his accomplices yelling in order to concentrate. It seemed completely unreasonable to accept the defendant's claim that they were unaware that they were dragging a large human body behind them. When the criminals sped away after dislodging Andrew's body, they reached speeds of well over 100 miles per hour. It was only about 11:30 at night, and there were other vehicles on the road, a few of which were forced to swerve into the shoulder or off of the road in order to avoid being struck by the fleeing gray sedan. Anyone walking on the sidewalks on either side of the road that night would have been at serious risk of death. Henry Long agreed that drivers who have experience outrunning the police are confident that they can get away because they are prepared to create extreme risk to the safety of the public, and they know that the police cannot do the same. One reason for disconnecting the vehicle's brake lights, he said, was because police will hang back if they have no way of knowing when the car they're chasing is braking. A person having decided to behave in this manner, who kills a police officer, should certainly be found guilty of murder per the prosecution, and very obviously, everyone in the car was responsible for what happened that night. In the collective opinion of the jury, after finally deliberating for about 12 hours on July 24, 2020, the prosecution had not proven that the criminals had known that they were dragging the body of Andrew Harper behind them as they made their escape. This resulted in charges of manslaughter being laid against them rather than charges of willful murder. The suspects and their families, bereft of any semblance of class or decorum, cheered and celebrated in the courtroom. Lissy Harper called the display, quote, quite a kick in the gut, while reeling in disbelief as to the jury's rendering. Obviously, it's nearly impossible to prove what someone did or did not know in a given instance, but the prosecution had certainly presented a strong enough case to have secured murder convictions. The jury, simply and unfortunately, remained unconvinced beyond a reasonable doubt. Such is the required gamble inherent in any legal proceeding, even at its most precise. The judge had the following to say at sentencing, quote, Henry Long, you were the leader of the group that night and gave the orders which resulted in the death of Police Constable Harper. You drove the car which killed him. I do not believe that if you had known he was caught up, you would have stopped, but I do accept that you did not know this until the point at which he became detached from the car. You did not stop then, did you? In explaining why you are not guilty of murder, you also explained why you are dangerous. You value your ability to steal things and to drive away afterwards more highly than the lives of people who might get in your way. After what happened to Police Constable Harper, you drove in a manner in which you would have rammed another police car if it had not gotten out of your way. You created a risk of death to other drivers as well. You regard this all as exciting and entirely normal behavior. Often in your evidence, you used the expression, just an ordinary police chase. You have used words which explain that you understand how dangerous this behavior really is, but you gave no clue that you think it is wrong. As things stand, if you were to be free, I am confident that you would carry on as before, going out thieving all the time and using cars to escape by any means required. It is only a matter of time before someone else dies if you do that, unquote. Addressing the other two criminals, he said, quote, Albert Bowers and Jesse Cole, you are both somewhat younger and you were not ringleaders. You also suffer from learning difficulties which make you more likely to follow the lead of someone who is more capable than you are. I have decided to deal with you equally because the real determining factor of this sentence is what you did and the harm you caused, unquote. Henry Long was sentenced to 16 years in prison, while Bowers and Cole received terms of 13 years each. Thomas King, charged only with conspiracy to commit theft, received a 2-year sentence. Perhaps more disturbing than the facts of this case being ignored by the jury was the behavior of the criminals following their arrests and throughout all court proceedings. With their families and members of the traveler's site they lived in backing them and claiming police harassment as the reason for their arrests, they smirked and laughed as the full extent of their victims' almost unimaginable injuries were described in court. Albert Bowers even fell asleep while dashcam footage of their crimes was being played for the jury. Their families celebrated disgracefully when the verdicts were read. Their children had killed a man, yet they acted out carelessly and with no humility in front of the victim's family and friends. Try to imagine the degree of rage Andrew's loved ones were experiencing in these moments. Even after the trial, they had to abide the knowledge of celebratory parties being thrown in the criminals' community. It must have been beyond maddening. Quote, it would break Andrew's spirit to know about how things have gone following his death, his mother said. After the verdict, Lissy Harper had spoken before news cameras outside of the courtroom, expressing her immense disappointment in the jury's decision. She called the crime that took her husband from her barbaric and senseless, and highlighted the fact that justice had not been served for Andrew, who served his position with honor and passion, risking his life to protect the innocent. Quote, this has not been appreciated by the people who should have seen his heroic and selfless duty as so many other members of the public, total strangers, clearly do, unquote. Lissy appealed the lenient sentences of her husband's killers, but the appeal was rejected. Andrew had been let down by the very system that he bravely devoted his life to each day. Undeterred, Lissy set out on a mission to right the injustice she had witnessed. She lobbied for years to pass Harper's Law, which would mean automatic life sentences for those who caused the death of a first responder or emergency worker in the course of the commission of a crime. On April 28, 2002, Harper's Law was finally passed. Lissy Harper, in honor of her late husband, had done something very significant. It was a declaration written into law that those who serve on the front line could no longer be failed in death as Andrew had been failed. Though the families of the criminals celebrated classlessly in court upon the rendering of the verdict, the traveler movement, the larger community of which they are a part, publicly condemned the actions of Henry Long, Albert Bowers, and Jesse Cole. Regardless, to this day, none of them have expressed a shred of regret or remorse, with Bowers and Cole actually speaking of their plan to profit from the writing of a book about the experience. The pointlessness of the criminal activity that resulted in the loss of the life of Andrew Harper is mind-blowing, as is the idea of the criminals being willing to go as far as they did in the interest of stealing an ATV. The antagonists in this true crime story, which leads naturally to the disgust we feel when hearing it, are monumentally insecure and contemptible figures. Everything they did was either performative or done in the interest of greed, to selfishly make a buck for themselves at the expense of others. Their energies were directed nowhere else, certainly never toward anything productive or redeeming. The disregard they showed for everyone but themselves and their criminal intentions was disgusting. Being completely ego-driven and delusional, these miserable criminals fancied themselves tough guys, of course, as many insecure little boys do. Watching these diminutive, gnome-like sprites flexing for the cameras in court, completely unaware of how pathetic and sad they actually looked, was infuriating. To myself, and I'm sure to many listening, their very existences, being hopelessly misguided and malignant, are enraging. Now, on to the life that actually matters in this case. Andrew Harper, a born protector, did not set out to be a hero on the night of his death. He simply did what he had done countless times before, answered the call of someone in need, and run toward potential danger in the interest of fulfilling a purpose he deemed to be bigger than himself, standing dutifully at his post and selflessly helping others. In the moments that followed, his life was taken violently, but his purpose was never abandoned. Andrew Harper was a son, a husband, a colleague, and a friend. He was newly married with plans, hopes, and days ahead of him that would ultimately be stolen. The silence created by his absence is felt not only by those who loved him, but by every officer who reports for duty, every family who waits for someone to return home after a work shift, and every community that depends on the courage of people like him. Justice may debate intent and definitions, but the reality of this loss is beyond debate. A man who stood for others paid with his life, and no verdict can restore what was taken. Andrew Harper's legacy is not defined by how he died, but by how he lived, by his quiet professionalism, by service without the expectation of recognition, and by a willingness to stand between the innocent and harm. Andrew Harper will forever remain what he had always been, a police officer who did his duty and a life that mattered. Thank you for listening.
He had a very strong moral compass. He wanted to be this force of strength and act as a barrier between the people who do wrong in the world and the people who need protecting from it.